10 seconds. Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of The Bullet. This, a Training Friday edition of The Bullet. Joining me today, as he does every Training Friday, whoops, wrong one. There we go. Tom Walls of the Firearms Academy of Seattle. Tom, good to talk to you again this week, man.
Hey, good to see you again, Paul.
Today we decided that we were going to bring up the topic of the topic was going to be grip and stance, and I was going to explain today why the cross thumb grip is the only grip, and the Chapman stance is the only real stance if you're serious about defensive shooting. Your turn.
I'm going to really hurt your feelings. First off, let me tell you, I'm not going to say that any one grip is best. I'm going to, it's not a weasel, it's really, it depends. And you talk about the best. In the martial arts, my background includes martial arts for an adult lifetime. You run into this syndrome of, quote, my kung fu is best. My system is the best way. And if you think of it, it's ego-driven. Because if it wasn't the best way, I wouldn't be doing it. So everybody's tied up into that. You have to, as I've said almost every Training Friday episode, you have to be brutally honest and you have to see what works, because the answer might not be what you think it is. Or the answer may be good, but there may be a better one out there. Remember, we're building on stuff. So I'm going to challenge your assumption that this is best and that is best, and say, under these circumstances, you may want to do this. So instead of giving you answers, I'm going to help folks, hopefully, start asking the right questions.
So what you're telling me is not everybody is built exactly like I am?
Oh my God, isn't that a strange thought? I've heard some instructors say it's where your hinges are, how God puts you together, the length of the fingers, the distance between them, the hand size, the hand thickness, the flexibility. Add to that the variables of the gun, because if you've ever handled more than one gun, and we're talking about grip today with handguns, ever picked up more than one handgun of different manufacturer, you might notice some small differences there. You have to accommodate the interface between this thing, and always using dummy guns on this show, one of these guys. And it depends. There's a lot of it depends. So let's start asking the questions. Let's go into history a little bit. Okay, this is a replica of something probably 17th century, maybe early 18th century. You'll notice that the frame is made of wood. It's not steel or polymer, and it's got a bit of a curve to it. Okay, it's nice and smooth. They didn't have at that time the ability to put a lot of, metal machining in it. So the lockwork and the barrel were most of the metal. The rest were made of wood. And you will notice that the hammer's down, and this is a non-firing replica. And this is going to be really difficult to do on camera with the restrictions of what we have. That to do this, they can come around this way. To do this is awkward. My thumb is down.
Yeah.
My thumb is down because there's a natural little neck here. But you'll notice how flat the angle of my wrist is. So if we can do this, I'm going to try to hold this really, really horizontal. Notice the angle of my wrist stays the same. And I put into it a modern firearm. You notice that the barrel is no longer pointing straight. It's pointed up a little bit because this angle, lining up the triggers, this angle has changed rather dramatically.
Yeah, it has.
Again, hard to do in this camera setup. So you can't just go and say, well, we've always done it this way. We've always done it as a handgun, not a hands gun. It was made to do this. Okay? If you put two hands on it, you don't have a lot of control because of the curvature here, and it just rocks up. A second consideration is mechanically, with a semi-automatic pistol, we have the slide coming back and then forward again. And as it goes forward in its reciprocation, This is mass moving it forward that pulls the gun back down out of recoil that you don't have with this. But this wasn't an issue because it was a single shot. Or a more modern, again, a dummy gun, still the wrist cocks down. Or this, there's a little hump here that controls the recoil. But still the hand naturally falls thumb down. If I try to do thumb forward on this, this is a Smith & Wesson Model 10 replica, I've got problems hitting the latch. Well, if I had really long thumbs, it could interfere with the cylinder. I've got small hands. And if I do a thumbs forward grip on this, we've got the issue with the gas coming out the cylinder gap.
I was going to say you're gonna have an injured hand there very quickly.
With a 22, that's one thing, but there's always the cool video on YouTube with somebody with a hot dog on a stick and a 44 with hot loads. So these are considerations that you have to work with. Other considerations with the grip is look at the distance. You do this on from the bore line and look how high the trigger is on the 1911, and the trigger here on the revolver is much, much lower. This work? So if I line the barrels up, you can see that there's all kinds of a disparity on how far down you have to reach, which changes the angle of the wrist. What I'm saying is,
that all goes to, please, you are the expert, I am not, correct me if I'm wrong, that all goes to perceived recoil and follow-up shots and the speed of those follow-up shots.
Yes, exactly. It is, you and I discussed this off air, it is entirely possible to shoot a handgun, a single shot, with the finger and thumb alone and leave these three guys out. If you have good sight alignment and you get a good pinch here, thumb and forefinger, and you can smoothly press the trigger to the rear without disturbing that sight picture, you can get one perfectly accurate shot. It's these other fingers that move the gun around if we don't have a proper grip with all the slack out of it. With the second hand, this is where recoil control comes in, and this is your issue that you have with thumbs down. So still talking about grip, we haven't even got to stance yet. I have had a number of master instructors that I've had the benefit of training with over the years. Still see them. And I have had thumbs up if you want to hit anything. I mean, literally flag the thumb out. Thumb on top of the safety to keep it from re-engaging for the 1911 or manual safeties that are frame mounted. Below the safety because it's a better grip, or thumb down because if you were hanging from a branch like Beetle Bailey, you'd have a better grip. They're all correct. They all produce in some people the best results. How do you pick? You need to experiment with them knowing what kind of factors affect what other kind of factors. So a grip has to do a couple things. For the very, very first shot, you have to have proper engagement on the trigger. Okay, that's generally considered to be somewhere between this first digit joint and the tip, and it varies depending on the shooter. Some shooters with very, 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 very light triggers, the competition shooters, literally 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds, they can get away with the tip. It's very sensitive, and they can just literally they'll tap that trigger. For most of us, it's roughly in the middle to that joint. If it's a revolver, definitely in that joint because you have more mechanical leverage. And I'm just picking one of these at random. At this, well, let's pick this one. This shows better. So with the finger in my preferred place here, and it's my preferred place because I've experimented with it and I know what gets me the best results. Okay, wrap it around, and of course we know that we need the web of the hand high up on the pistol. This is a lever. This is a force pushing back. We don't want it at the bottom of the lever. We want it at the top to minimize muzzle flip. Gun does two things. It flips and then it recoils. So we need to control both those. The recoil is probably the least of the problems. To get the hand high on the axis of the bore, a little ripple in there, depends on how you pick the gun up from the bench or if you're working from the holster, how you attack your pistol in the holster, A good instructor can go over that with you. Video, I love to get my cell phone out and show holster technique because it's so much better than words that we really can't get into on our setup here. So you've got that set up. These fingers need to be up high together. If you have them splayed out, or finger grips, if the finger grips don't really fit your fingers, it changes the pressure here.
Yeah.
What we want is everything consistent. And then if you squeeze these fingers and take all the gap out of it, there's no place for the pistol to go in sympathetic muscle contraction. And when you press the trigger, the only thing that moves is the trigger finger. On the other hand,
let me get a couple comments in here quick.
Oh, go. They drive it much better than I do.
Speaking of the best judo, Robert says the best is Puerto Rican judo. Do you know it if I got a knife? Do you know if I got a gun? And this one, C&T Designs and Arms, who, by the way, is going to be on with you and I, Tom, tomorrow night on the weekend edition of the Bullet. C&T Designs and Arms says no one teaches shooting with just one hand as their primary shooting position. The only reason to shoot one-handed is one arm is wounded or otherwise occupied. Well, C&T, I'm going to tell you this. From my perspective, a gunfight is what? First of all, it's a fight. There's a really good chance that other arm is going to be occupied. That's why you need to practice both single dominant hand and single non-dominant hand shooting.
I am always leery if someone says no one or never. I would find that statement, though, to be generally true, but you can pick up a lot of flaws if you separate the hands. Teaching one-handed shooting is not where we start when we teach, nor do I know anybody that does. But getting back to what I was talking about, getting the spaces and the slack out, especially with the bottom couple of fingers, if you find that your groups are starting to string to 6 o'clock, a lot of times, I can show it here, it's these fingers are a little loose, and as you're pressing the trigger, you're getting sympathetic muscle contraction here. And as you press the trigger, these lower fingers are also pressing. Whereas if you take these lower fingers and crush the gun back into your palm, you remove that wiggle, you remove that slack in the hand, and the gun is firmly fixed to the hand. But you were talking about thumb position, weren't you?
Well, yeah, and I'm going to say thumb position from my perspective for one reason and one reason only. The very first firearm training I went to, bar none, was Kathy Jackson came out and taught before her handgun class. She taught handgun retention. And I learned from Kathy, who I still consider my mentor, that with thumbs down and thumbs crossed, you have infinitely better control if you're not doing your job and somebody does get close enough to try and get a hand on your gun. You have infinitely better control than the thumbs up when you're going to bust a thumb, or the thumbs forward where you're going to dislocate a thumb.
Exactly. I also teach handgun retention. I'm the lead handgun retention instructor for the Firearms Academy of Seattle, and it's always taught, I'm going to hold it upside down, thumbs down, because in the holster, when you're doing retention, somebody trying to do a holster snatch, the first thing I try to do is to get my hand on top of theirs and push the gun straight down into the holster with the web of my hand, which means my thumb down. Gives it some stabilization. So yeah, I agree. However, in my experience, following the strong advice of one of my best mentors and still dear friend, I shot thumbs down for an entire year. So I couldn't say, well, thumbs down might be better if I practiced it more. So I really don't know. I practiced and trained, and I was in law enforcement at the time, and shot thumbs down for an entire year. At the end of that year, within a week after, we had to shoot a qual for the department. And I went back to my thumbs forward grip, which I had been using previously, and for the first time shot a perfect qual. So that tells me that there may be more than one right answer.
There may
With the
be.
semi-automatic handgun, historically, and again, this is an awkward angle, the thumb's forward grip allows, with this thumb forward, allows the gun to come back and settle a little bit more in the hand during recoil. I haven't tried that. If you want to experiment yourself, be honest and get a video camera or a cell phone. Get a timer and see what your splits are. That's the sort of thing to start looking for.
Sure.
With the thumb
and
up.
no matter what, it's going to help you with your grouping because you're going to be practicing.
And practicing mindfully, thinking about what you're doing because you want to get good data. If you're going out there just to confirm that you're right and no other reason, and you're not open to the fact that maybe something is going on you've not yet learned, you're going to waste ammo. Another thing with the thumb, there's a muscle here. When I have the thumb up, as some people, and again, famous instructors, insist that you need to do, it pulls it away from the grip safety on the 1911s and the Springfield XDs and other guns that have a grip safety. This is why we advocate when you are reholstering, when you put the gun back in the holster, to take the thumb and put it on the back of the slide, if you can, even on the hammer, to pull it away from the grip safety. But if your hand's of a certain construction, not meaty, and you shoot thumbs up, guess what? You haven't disengaged the safety and your gun does nothing. Okay?
Yeah.
You also don't have that recoil control, but some people's hands, the rest of the hand will support that. Okay? Thumbs forward, you don't have as much grab for retention. Thumbs down works, but I find that thumbs down, my second hand comes in, I'm going to exaggerate this, there's going to be a gap right here, and that's a place for the gun to wiggle to. I want to take out all the gaps. So the conventional popular grip now is taking this curve, mating it with this curve here. Some people more forward. Is one better than the other? I challenge you to burn some ammo and check it out. You had that look, Paul, like somebody had made a comment.
Yes, I want to get two more comments in. Actually, both of them from. I get three comments. Let me correct myself right off the bat. Your grip choice should be what grip is most consistent for you with your gun. Now that I'll absolutely will go ahead with. Yes.
I would go with a caveat, and that's true. Consistency is critical. Not just essential, it's critical. But it's also got to be one that works well. So when you find one that works well, be consistent, because as I said, if you move your fingers around, that's different pressures on the gun. And if you have any slack, that's going to move it around in ways that will make you go, oh, I thought it was a pistol, not a shotgun.
Yeah. Let me get this next one in. Sam of Anarchy 92 says,
Sam?
Best to train for as many scenarios, including what CNT was talking about, when your other hand may be occupied or injured. Well, and I want to bring this up here real quick, and we're coming up on where we got it. We may have to just stay on grip and go to stance in 2 weeks.
See how it goes.
But I'm going to say this: if you are in and I've heard this from multiple sources, although I heard it first from Kathy Jackson. If you are in a gunfight, the number one thing that you are going to be focusing on is that gun that's pointing back at you. So where are your shots going to go? If you are intensely focused on something, where are your shots going to go? Where are the bad guys' shots going to go? It's not out of the question that your shooting hand could get injured in a gunfight.
We see this all the time when there's our cartoon or photorealistic targets where the target, the bad guy, has a weapon because the bullet holes will be clustered around the bad guy's weapon. That's a natural focus point, and you tend to go where you look. If you're driving in a field and there's one tree and you stare at the tree, you'll hit the tree. If you're in a gunfight and you're staring at the weapon, then the knife or the gun or whatever, you're tending to hit that. And we see this as far as injuries. It's not at all uncommon. So you have to train for that, or you've just had an injury. I spent 8 weeks with my dominant side in a sling. And I went and I took a class at FAS because I get to do that as an instructor. And I took it non-dominant hand, one-handed, because I have the left side gear, because any good shooter knows that that can happen at any time. You get a sprain, you fall down, you get a bad cut in the kitchen, whatever. Your dominant hand can be taken out of the game, and you still need to be able to safely and competently handle a firearm. I want to practice that. Practice what you suck at.
I still do. I practice a lot with it, and I still do. I'm not as good with my non-dominant, my left hand, as I am with my right.
When Diane and I go to the range to practice, and we're not sure what particularly we want to practice that day, we'll grab up like a dot torture target, or we have copies of all kinds of different quals from all over the country, and we'll shoot one of those, and we'll take what we suck at the most, and that's what we practice.
Go back to a comment here by C&T. So one seems to be more accurate. The other one gives you better retention.
Not necessarily.
I'm going to say one's
some people
probably
shoot
a little
extremely
quicker.
accurately.
I'm going to say thumbs forward is a little bit quicker for follow-up shots. But my thought has always been, if I've done a good job with my first couple, those probably should have gotten the job done.
C&T, try this if you can do this at a range and do it safely. Take your handgun, load it with one round if you're uncomfortable. Hold it in the web of your hand, just with your thumb and your trigger finger, and very carefully and smoothly press the trigger and get one shot. And I suspect you will be wonderfully accurate for that one shot. I do it as a demonstration frequently. Retention, if you're shooting thumbs down, yeah, retention is the way to go, because you're not just holding the gun against the forces of the gun, against the forces of the bad guy. But some people shoot thumbs down and shoot accurately thumbs down. Okay, again, it's the issue for me, the way my hands are built, I get a gap right in here that gives the gun wiggle room, and I have a little trouble getting a consistent and solid grip shot to shot. Some people do just fine with it. What I'm saying is, go to the range and try it. If you can't measure it in a number, it's just an opinion. Measure your groups, which means keep a tape measure in your range bag or some way to measure. If you have a timer, use your timer, because it's really easy to say to yourself subjectively, boy, that felt better. That felt faster. That felt smoother. And you might be right, but you might equally be wrong. It's amazing. What feels good isn't necessarily the best thing. So put something objective on it. See if your splits are better. See how that translates to price. How are we doing on time? Yeah, we may not get to it.
Well, yeah, I'm going to share a little bit of personal story here for a second. As I've said many times, Kathy Jackson was my very, very first professional firearms course. A few years after I hosted her up here in Sioux Falls, I hosted another couple of trainers that came up. I'm not going to name them because I do not want to embarrass them, and I do not want a rematch. The part of their class was taking away a firearm, and they picked me as the guy who had been through handgun retention to be the guy they were going to take the firearm away from. And I looked right at one of the trainers. I said, how hard do you want to try? How hard do you want me to try? This guy, former Marine, says, try as hard as you like. I'm getting it away from you. And if I would have tried harder, he wouldn't have, but I thought it was probably bad form to make the instructor look bad in front of paying students.
Yeah. When we teach a handgun retention course, the typical student we get has no combative experience, no hand-to-hand experience, no martial arts experience, but they always want to know what would be like on the street. How would it really be? And we have to give the speech ahead of time. Don't do that, because you're here for like one day. You already know, if you want to try it, you already know what the attack is going to look like from your partner, because you've been practicing it for the last 10 or 15 minutes. And you probably already figured out how you're going to counter it. So that makes it fairly artificial. The best we can do at handgun retention is encourage people to retake the class and to practice it between. And the other thing is, you have this little lever here that they call the felon repulsion lever, and if you're that close, rather than fight over the gun, if you can get a shot off, you can articulate that in court. So, handgun retention and the shooting techniques we're talking about today, there's some overlap as far as where your thumb goes, but as far as grip, two different things to accomplish two different.
One more comment here, man, real quick. One test is worth 1,000 expert opinions was on a piece of testing equipment in a shop I worked in. I like that.
Yep, absolutely. Give him a gold star. That was a good one. It's you've heard me say this. I know you have, Paul, and anybody that's heard me talk before. It's a caveat at the Firearms Academy of Seattle, experiential learning. I'll let you try shooting something wrong. I'll tell you how to shoot it wrong, and you can see for yourself why we say what we say. For instance, something else you can try, I think at most commercial ranges, when we talk about, again, dummy gun, we talk about shooting one-handed, we take the support hand and we clench it hard to get sympathetic muscle contraction. So we get a stronger grip on this hand without going into long explanation. Okay, the students see us do that. That's the only way they see it. And some of them aren't really convinced. So I say, okay, after you've done a half dozen or more shots like this, you see the results you get, you know what the recoil feels like with just one hand on the gun, take the support hand and dangle. Let it sit like a sock full of rice. Just let it flop around like a dead fish. And take another 4, 5, 6 shots. And then tell me what the difference is. And that usually makes people understand better. And that's my goal, is to not just tell you the answer so you can argue from authority, well, so-and-so instructor said this, so it must be right. Or it just makes sense, like you're having a debate without any actual experience. Form the hypothesis. Okay, it's less than a theory, and then go and test it and see if it acts the way you predicted it would. That's the measure of success. You've got to have a metric. Okay, what will I call success with this grip? Am I shooting faster? Am I shooting better groups? Do I have more control? Can I transition? Whatever that is, make an experiment. Try different things. Actually, write it down so you know what you're doing. Define what success will look like, times, groups, whatever, and then go and try it. Give it an honest test, because that's how this new stuff develops. That's how Jack Weaver came up with the Weaver stance. Everybody had been shooting from the hip. Don't use the bumpy things on the front. It's too close. And guys were wicked fast back in the day. Mm-hmm. But they weren't hitting very well. He tried something a little different. Lo and behold, Lena Michalik with her 2 fingers ahead of the trigger guard.
She's got
grip
10
instead
fingers.
of 1.
She can do
She
that.
may be onto something. She's a better shooter than I am. Do I appeal to authority and say we must shoot that way? You can see pro shooters with all kinds of different thumb positions on the gun.
We've got,
so again,
we've got just a couple
hand
minutes left, Tom. As I do every time you're on, I need to ask you what's coming up at Firearms Academy of Seattle and anything else.
Wow, that went quick. In. We are in full swing. We have our own classes, everything from introduction to handgun to tactical carbine, defensive shotgun, our own courses in addition to guest instructors. We have Masad Ayub coming out for his Gold Standard Mag 40 next month. We have, in no particular order, Steve Fisher, Jared Rustin, Craig Douglas is coming out for some close quarter stuff. Easiest way to see what's going on and when it is and how to access it here in the Pacific Northwest is look at our website at www.firearmsacademy.com.
Very cool. On my end, that wraps up the Monday through Friday broadcast this week. We are coming back at you in 23 and a half hours, or 24 and a half hours, 7 p.m. Central Time tomorrow night. We'll be live. We'll cover the week in review. Tom's going to be here. You see the CNT Designs and Arms commenting. He's going to be here tomorrow night. And one more. And I got to pull my calendar up to see who else is going to be joining us. And that is going to be Tony Simon is going to be on tomorrow night. That ought to be fun. So That does it for us today. Do come join us tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. Central Time. Thank you for watching. Podcast listeners, thank you for listening. I hope you got something out of it. A lot of visuals today. We'll see you next time.